The Jade Chamber, an architectural marvel constructed entirely from Mora. In the game, it hadn't seemed all that large. But in reality, Ningguang had spared no expense building it. After all, did anyone truly think a modest pavilion could fall and deal a devastating blow to Ozhel, the overlord of the Vortex? Of course, it wasn't that large either, roughly the size of a grand estate. Its layout boasted an elegant blend of pavilions and terraces, interspersed with streams and rockeries. Every detail, from its intricately carved beams to the vibrantly painted panels, reflected its unparalleled beauty, especially now, bathed in the gentle light of dawn. The golden sunlight mingled with the sea of clouds, creating a scene of surreal harmony. Mist curled around the towering structure as if it were serenading the Jade Chamber itself. The asymmetrical placement of its pavilions and varying heights broke away from the rigid beauty of symmetrical design, imbuing it with an ethereal, free-spirited charm. And yet, its extravagance added a subtle touch of earthly vulgarity, a paradoxical flaw in its otherwise divine allure. Qixing and Ganyu sat at a table, surrounded by the remaining members of the Qixing. Of the group, 3 were absent: Tianji, Kaiyang, and Yaguang stars, who were still away from Liyue Harbor. The rest, however, had all gathered. At the head of the table sat Ningguang, holding her ornate smoking pipe. She flipped nonchalantly through a financial report from the Ministry of Civil Affairs, her demeanor one of detached indifference. It was as if her thoughts were entirely elsewhere, despite Qixing's insistent declaration that this meeting concerned Liyue's future for the next millennia. Then again, precisely because Qixing had orchestrated this meeting, Ningguang saw little reason to invest herself deeply. And why was Ningguang, rather than Qixing, seated at the head of the table? The answer was simple: authority and territory. Not only was Ningguang the most powerful among them at the moment, but the Jade Chamber was her domain. Moreover, Ningguang had her own frustrations to contend with. She had been tirelessly occupied with preparations for the upcoming Rite of Dissension, and her schedule was already packed. Just this morning, she had planned to meet with representatives of the Snezhnean merchants to discuss the market for ores from the chasm. But before she could leave, Qixing had stormed in, dragging her off with claims that nothing was more important than this meeting. And now, Ningguang had to sit through a session that felt, to her, like an affront to her recent efforts. From the start, the atmosphere of the meeting was tense. Tianshu Star, who sat near Ningguang, glanced between her and Qixing. Neither woman showed any overt emotion on their faces. But having worked with them both for years, the elderly Tianshu could easily sense the simmering dissatisfaction in each of them. Suppressing a sigh, he decided to step in as a mediator. Well then, he began, his tone light. Tianquan has gathered us here for a Qixing meeting. What's the agenda? Agenda? Ningguang echoed lazily, turning a page of her report. She tapped her smoking pipe lightly on the table and said, "That's a question for Yuhun Star. She's the one who insisted I call this meeting." Qixing's face darkened, and she slammed her hand on the table. "Do you have to pick a fight with me right now?" Ningguang chuckled softly, her gaze lifting to meet Qixing's. Her eyes, sharp and mesmerizing, held a calmness as deep and lifeless as a still pond. "Pick a fight? Where did that come from? Do you think I have the luxury of wasting my time on something as petty as this?" She leaned back slightly and added, "If there's something you need to discuss, Yuhun Star, I suggest you get on with it. We're all very busy. I, for one, have a meeting with the Snezhnean representatives. I can't afford to waste my time here." Qixing's eyes turned icy. "Ningguang, now. Tianxian Star Madame Ashen chuckled as she stepped in to defuse the situation. "Qixing, don't get so worked up. Ningguang's been overwhelmed lately with the Rite of Dissension and trade negotiations. She's tired." Turning to Qixing, Madame Ashen continued, "Didn't you say this was about a matter of immense importance for Liyue's future? Why don't you go ahead and tell us?" Hearing Ashen's words, Qixing snorted but held back her retort. Taking a deep breath, she began, her tone steady yet firm. "A year ago, a foreigner named Ryen appeared near the chasm. You should all be familiar with him by now. More than familiar, Ningguang replied, finally setting down her report. At her gesture, her attendant Baiwen stepped forward to replace her now cold tea with a fresh cup. From what I've heard, this Ryen immediately became acquainted with Yuhun Star. It seems the two of you share quite a few ideas about governance and rule by the people. Ningguang's lips curved into a faint smirk. Tell me, Yuhun Star, has the foreigner awakened your tender affections at last? Have you finally fallen for someone? She paused, her smile widening slightly. However, if this is all about that foreigner, then I see no reason to waste time on this meeting. With that, Ningguang rose from her seat, intending to leave. Qixing let out a cold snort, watching as Ningguang began to head toward her chambers. Only then did she speak, her voice low but deliberate. Ryen is a forward thinker. He comes from a nation far more advanced than ours, one without gods. He's given me many ideas and suggestions. He is my friend. Ningguang's expression didn't change, nor did she stop walking. She seemed entirely uninterested in whatever but just as she reached the door, Qixing's voice took on a sharper edge, her next words cutting through the room like a blade. But what I have to say about Ryen has nothing to do with that, Qixing said firmly. Ryen possesses an entire world, a whole, untamed, uncivilized world, teeming with resources and filled with wonder. The moment her words fell, the entire jade chamber plunged into a stunned silence. Only the sound of the wind whistling outside could be heard. Ningguang's brows knitted together as she turned back to her seat and sat down again. Noticing this, Qixing smirked slightly and remarked with a hint of sarcasm. What happened to Tianquan Star's urgency to discuss her trade deals? Ningguang met Qixing's gaze, her expression calm. After a moment of silence, she spoke softly. If you feel my earlier attitude was inappropriate, I can apologize. But you must understand, this is not something to joke about. Of course not. How could I ever joke about Li Yue's future? Qixing frowned, her tone resolute. Yesterday, Ganyu and I personally went to Ryen's world to investigate. Not only that, but we brought back approximately 200 tons of resources. Hearing this, Ningguang's expression changed slightly. She waved her hand, and Baiwen immediately understood the signal, departing the room without a word. Moments later, an intricate barrier of runes powered by adeptal energy enveloped the jade chamber, sealing it from outside interference. Tian Shu and Madame Ashen exchanged a glance. Though both were visibly shaken by what they were hearing, they chose to remain silent. They were old, and their tenure as members of the Qixing was nearing its end. Without successors to take their places, they were reluctant to meddle in decisions that could reshape Li Yue's destiny. Instead, they left the matter to Ningguang and Qixing. Can you take full responsibility for your words? Are you willing to swear an oath before Rex Lapis himself? The subtle movements of Ningguang's smoking pipe betrayed her inner turmoil. Her hand trembled slightly, and her motions became increasingly erratic. An entire world. No one understood the implications of this better than Ningguang, the self-made businesswoman who had risen to become the wealthiest person in all of Teyvat. Qixing didn't answer Ningguang's question directly. Instead, she exchanged a meaningful glance with Ganyu. Together, they stood and moved to the open center of the room. With a simple gesture, Qixing produced 2 piles of coal, setting them down on the floor. This is a resource from that world. According to Ryen, this is coal, 2 piles of it, consisting of 128 pieces in total. Ningguang's brows furrowed in confusion. This is all. Qixing sighed, clearly anticipating this reaction. Without offering further explanation, she gestured for Ganyu, who brought forward a large scale. Qixing picked up a single piece of coal and casually placed it onto the scale. Initially, Ningguang seemed disinterested, even skeptical of what appeared to be a trivial demonstration. But the moment the coal landed, a resounding thud echoed throughout the chamber. The scale groaned under the weight, teetering precariously. Ningguang's eyes sharpened as her skepticism melted into shock. Her gaze instinctively darted to the measurement on the scale, and her pupils contracted. 167 kilograms? That's impossible. This is reality. Ganyu interjected, her voice firm and steady as she met Ningguang's startled eyes. One piece of coal weighs 167 kilograms. The 2 piles we brought back amount to just over 21 tons. Lady Ningguang, do you know how long it took us to mine these? Before Ningguang could answer, Ganyu's voice rang out like a hammer striking an anvil. In a single mine shaft spanning a 30-meter radius, the 3 of us worked for 20 minutes. In that short time, we extracted 3.5 piles of coal. Altogether, we brought back approximately 37 tons of coal. Lady Ningguang, do you believe that such a world holds the key to Liyue's future for the next 1,000 years? As Ganyu's words settled, an undeniable realization swept over Ningguang, Tianshu, and the others present. A world like this, abundant resources, effortless extraction, ease of transportation, unfathomable potential. It wasn't just an opportunity, it was a divine gift.